Cabinet Secretaries Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth are facing questions from lawmakers today over the deadly U.S. military strikes off the coast of Venezuela. Democrats and even some Republicans are demanding more information about the Trump administration's campaign. New video released Monday shows the latest strikes in the eastern Pacific Ocean that killed 8 people. The administration labels them narco-terrorists. Since September, the U.S. has conducted more than 24 strikes on suspected drug boats, killing almost 100 people. Joining me now to discuss is the Hill's White House reporter Brett Samuels. Hey, Brett, so President Trump continues to escalate his rhetoric towards Venezuela. There is a massive military buildup in the Caribbean right now. How does this fit into the America First framework that supporters said was about avoiding foreign entanglements?
Yeah, Drew, that's sort of one of the lingering questions around this whole campaign toward Venezuela. It's sort of at odds with, as you mentioned, this sort of America First image that Trump likes to promote, as well as this idea that Trump has promoted in his second term so far, that he's this peacemaker in chief, that he wants to end conflicts around the globe, obviously carrying out these military strikes on these alleged drug boats and sort of building up a military presence near Venezuela kind of cuts against that. Now, what the administration would argue is that, they are stopping the flow of drugs into the United States and that is a worthwhile endeavor, that it's protecting the homeland. Experts would point to the fact that relatively little fentanyl and drugs actually originate in Venezuela that comes into the United States. But that is sort of the argument that the administration is making to align with its agenda, is that this is an effort to protect the homeland ultimately against the flow of drugs and migrants.
Now, Hegseth and Rubio today are being grilled by lawmakers over the strikes. Will the two face pressure from Republicans during these meetings? And what, if anything, do you expect to come out of the briefing?
Yeah, I think they definitely will face certainly some questions from Republicans who have been critical of, if not these military strikes as a whole, they have certainly been critical of kind of the legal rationale for them, or the lack of explanation from the administration, the lack of information coming from the administration given to Congress. I think Republicans, we've certainly seen, have wanted to be more involved in this, have wanted to get more information from the Pentagon, from the administration, about what exactly is the basis for these military strikes, what exactly is happening with these military strikes. I think certainly Democrats are going to be the ones who are outspoken after this and are going to be critical of any refusal to turn over video footage, for example. But, certainly Republicans, I think, have shown that they do have questions about this and that they are willing to at least press the administration behind closed doors about what's going on here.
Now, Trump signed his latest executive order yesterday, designating fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. During the signing, he had this to say. Take a listen.
I have to say the drugs coming in by sea are down 94%. And we're trying to figure out who the other 6% are. But they're down 94%, and we're going to start hitting them on land, which is a lot easier to do, frankly.
Now, many critics worry Trump could be leading the U.S. into a prolonged military conflict here. Do you have an idea of what the administration thinks the end goal of both these attacks here on the drug boats, but possible attacks on land inside Venezuela as well?
Yeah, it's interesting, Drew, hearing the president say that, because he's made similar remarks for really the last couple of months, sort of teasing this idea of land strikes in Venezuela, but he is yet to actually carry those out. So he is sort of teasing that out, sort of holding it over the proceedings here, holding it over Venezuela, this possibility that he could escalate this to carrying out land strikes. So that certainly bears watching whether he'll follow through on that. But as far as the end game, I think it's hard not to look at the end game and think that it has to do with a change in leadership and potentially ousting Nicolas Maduro, the embattled president of Venezuela. This is something during Trump's first term that played out, where the Trump administration backed the opposition leader at the time, Juan Guaido, against Nicolas Maduro. Maduro still in power, obviously, during Trump's second administration. But now we're seeing this military buildup. We're seeing the support for the opposition leader in Venezuela again. Hard not to kind of view it in that broader context of efforts to potentially see a change in leadership in Venezuela.
Regarding the executive order, does labeling fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction unlock certain avenues for military intervention that might not have been there otherwise?
Yeah, it certainly, I think that's sort of what folks who are looking at this order see it as essentially just an expansion of executive power to, whether it's military operations or giving more authority to the Attorney General and the Justice Department to potentially file criminal charges or impose, other penalties against any governments, any cartels, any organizations that are moving fentanyl or connected to fentanyl trafficking. It does outline, this executive order does outline, essentially actions that the Department of Defense and the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, could take. So, certainly I think it can be viewed in that context that this is just another way that the Trump administration and the president is kind of widening the scope of kind of what they are going to be able to justify and point to as sort of a rationale for some of their actions if they do decide to continue to escalate their fight against Venezuela or anywhere else where they see, fentanyl or other drugs originating.
Critics point out this language is similar to what was used in the run-up to the war in Iraq. The Bush administration claimed Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction to justify invading the country. If U.S. troops touch ground in Venezuela, could we see a major fracture within the Republican Party and within that America First base of the MAGA movement that sought to avoid entanglements like this and was highly critical of the Iraq War?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, Drew, that is where we might see, really a red line for a lot of Trump supporters, for a lot of Republicans in Congress, who certainly, I think, would argue that they would need to be consulted and need to grant congressional approval for any boots on the ground or expansion of a conflict in Venezuela. As far as Trump supporters are concerned, we saw this play out even when Trump was considering and ultimately carried out military action against Iran and targeted its nuclear facilities. We saw a lot of outspoken Trump supporters raised concerns that was going to lead to this wider entanglement that the U.S. would be involved in down the road. Of course, that didn't end up, ultimately being the case. That was a one-off strike. But again, I think it just was kind of a preview of the fact that when Trump does consider getting involved in these conflicts, especially if it involves potential U.S. boots on the ground, that is something that his base is really skeptical of and is not afraid to really kind of speak out about.
The Washington Post had an interesting article recently, said that conservative pollster Mark Mitchell tried to explain to Trump that there was a disconnect between what the administration seemed to be focused on and what Trump's passionate base of supporters wanted to see, and that there was a risk that this focus on foreign policy could alienate voters who supported Trump over issues like affordability and the economy. What did you make of that story?
Yeah, it was interesting. It kind of called to mind, I think, ultimately, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman who is now going to retire in January, but of course had been one of President Trump's staunchest supporters, and then in recent months had this kind of falling out, this disillusionment. But Marjorie Taylor Greene likes to refer to herself as kind of a bellwether or a canary in the coal mine, that she's, ahead of the curve on these things. And this was sort of the crux of her argument a few months ago, is that Trump was too focused on what was happening in Israel and Gaza, too focused on foreign entanglements or foreign policy achievements, and not focused enough on lowering the cost of healthcare, lowering the cost of groceries for Americans. I think that it's interesting that perhaps that is part of a broader trend that we're seeing, and something heading into a midterm election year that maybe Trump is going to need to course correct before it's too late, to kind of refocus on domestic issues and sort of reassure even his base supporters, that he's focused on the things that he talked about on the campaign trail. He's focused on these kind of economic messages that really got a lot of people to support him in the first place in 2024.
So Vice President Vance is going to be in Pennsylvania today to tout President Trump's economic success, but recent polling shows voters are starting to sour on the president's handling of this important issue. As filing deadlines pass and Republicans can no longer face new challenges from the right for the 2026 midterms, do you expect more Republicans to break with the president, especially if sentiment on the economy continues in the direction that it's heading?
Yeah, this is the real catch-22, I think, that Republicans are going to face in the 2026 midterms. On the one hand, as you mentioned, Drew, President Trump's approval ratings, particularly around the economy, are really plummeting. Voters are clearly not feeling the benefits of the Trump administration's policies. The Trump administration would argue that may change in 2026, but for now, Republican candidates are going to have to decide, do they distance themselves from the president because of those poor approval ratings? Or, the sort of flip side to that is, Republicans traditionally have hitched their wagon to Trump because Trump drives out a lot of low propensity voters. He's sort of a turnout machine unto himself. And so, if Republicans sort of, attach themselves to Trump more closely, maybe they benefit from some of that turnout from those Trump supporters who might go out and vote for them in the midterm. So this is the choice Republicans are going to have to face, and sort of the line they're going to have to walk is, how do they keep the support of those diehard Trump voters without fully alienating sort of those independent or potential crossover voters who are just sort of fed up or not really feeling the benefits of the Trump administration's policies.
All right, lots going on over there at the White House. We will leave it at that. Brett Samuels, thanks so much.
Thanks, Drew.